My name is Sean T. Ross, a recent graduate of MA Material Futures and a member of the United Matters Design Collective. My practice tends to focus on the intersection of nature and technology, and today I'm going to be talking about how soil and what lives in it plays a role in my work. So, soil houses a rich biome, home to a staggering range of microscopic life. The fact that so much diversity can be found in such a readily available medium is part of the reason that we are seeing such a rise in the field of biodesign. Featured here are 3 types of bacteria, all of which can be found in soil and have potential applications in the design world. Sporacina pasteuri has the ability to create calcite minerals when in the presence of calcium and urine. Designers have already begun work on using this attribute to create new bacterial-grown materials, or to improve the production of current building materials such as a biomason cement. Xanthinobacterium lividum is capable of producing a compound called viocin, and it produces this viocin as a byproduct of its metabolism. It's a dark violet colour and can be used as a non-toxic pigment for colouring textiles or even staining wood. The third bacteria, which is the bacteria I'm going to be focusing on for this talk, is Geobacter sulfurojucens, and it tends to make its home in river mud as it prefers an anaerobic environment, but it's not completely adverse to other soil-based homes, and you may be able to find it in sort of more common soils. The species can feast on metal pollutants found in water and metabolizes them to produce electrical energy for the sort of interactions of its cells. However, it tends to produce more than it's needed and it emits the waste electrons into its surroundings. It's essentially like a living mini microscopic power plant. If you're looking to work with microbes, then I'd highly recommend taking a look at the microcollective.com, which has a archive of the different types of bacteria that's applicable for design work and how you can get hold of them. The illustration here shows the basic anatomy of a Geobacter cell. The pili that surround the body of the cell, so the head of the cell, act as nanowires, which transfer the waste electrons from the cell into its surrounding environment. The image above it is an electron microscope image showing the same thing. During my initial research into this bacteria, I came across some other examples of it being put to use. And on the left, we have Dr. Aviva Presa-Aiden, who works on developing microbial fuel cells to capture the energy of these bacterium. The goal of her research project was to simplify the required components that would be needed to build such a device, and so that it could serve as an alternative energy source in remote populations. With enough of these cells, you could produce enough energy to charge a mobile phone, which can be particularly useful if you're in an isolated area where the main source of energy is solar. And a big issue that people find with solar is the fact that, especially if you're in a remote location, if the solar panel breaks or is damaged, it's very difficult to repair without very precise bits of equipment and tools. The image on the right shows an example of how this kind of technology can be used by a designer. Theresa van Dogen uses Geobacter to power her bioreactors, which are the black cylinders you see in the center of these sculptures. The energy created is used to power small LEDs at the end of the metal arms, and the light from the LEDs is then reflected and refracted through glass lenses to mimic the way an insect's eye works. To expound on how a microbial fuel cell works, pictured here is one you would find more commonly in a laboratory environment. An electrode would be placed into each vessel, and then the vessels will be filled with a bacteria-rich medium. The 2 jars are separated by a semi-permeable barrier, and valves are attached to the sides of each so that the gases can be added or vented as needed. And when I first began looking into microbial fuel cells, I reached out to Professor Yannis Lorbelis for some assistance, and he informed me that this design of cell, while offering greater control, is not the most efficient. So with his assistance, we designed a simpler cell that was more fit for the purpose of generating electricity directly from mud, and by submerging the devices directly into the mud. This cell is made using two carbon fiber electrodes separated by a ceramic membrane. One electrode is fitted to the inside of the cell, while the other is wrapped around the outside, and both have a wire attached. These can then be submerged directly into the mud. The advantage of a carbon fiber electrode is that it has significantly larger surface area than a metal electrode would. Once placed in the mud, a resistor can be attached to the ends of the wire, and the geobacter in the mud will start to gather on the outside electrode and form a biofilm. Meanwhile, the electrode on the inside of the wall is still exposed to air, and consequently we can begin to see this transfer of electrons between the two. The strength of the cells build over a few weeks, and you can keep them going indefinitely if you feed the bacteria. So I fed mine with a mixture of a nutrient broth and acetate to sort of try and increase the carbon yield of the nutrient broth. However, as I was in lockdown, my supplies dwindled fairly quick, and I wasn't able to top up from the grow lab. So when I was starting out on the project that I'm about to share, I was shocked to find out about the hidden environmental costs of new technologies, and in particular things such as computers, phones, and electric vehicles and wind turbines. In order to produce the rechargeable batteries used, we first have to mine the necessary metals. A common combination of metals for electric batteries is a mix of cobalt and lithium. Lithium mining is by no means an environmentally friendly industry, and it can cause toxic leaks into the local water system, it can diminish air quality, and degrade the soil. As for cobalt, it's mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the process can be both environmentally and socially devastating. So you have young children being put to work in these artisanal mines, which often, they're equipped with no more than hand tools and ad hoc tunnel supports. Owing to cobalt's use in tech, it's known as blue gold, and the industry isn't regulated at all, and the mines are often left open and scattered around the landscape. For my graduate project, I explored the possibility of building a biocomputer as a way of producing digital technology, but in a more symbiotic way with nature, and the project was titled Transmitting Nature, the Earth's First Words. Pictured here is the final result. The project had to be completed from the confines of my apartment as owing to the first national lockdown here in London. I adapted my work to the new situation and had ended up building a 16-foot tall radio tower in my front garden. The tower was powered by 24 microbial fuel cells, which charged up supercapacitors. So I think I had 4 supercapacitors being charged by the 24 cells. I then connected ECG pads to some calathea plants and used the shifts in their action potentials to release bursts of the stored mud power. This energy then was sort of passed through some circuitry and relayed through the radio antenna, creating bursts of radio waves. And these radio bursts were then recorded and translated into binary code and eventually into letters and words. The pictures on the right show the microbial fuel cells submerged in the bacteria-rich medium, the mud. I've already explained how these work, so I won't linger too much on this slide. It's just to provide a little bit more context. The top illustration here explains a bit more about how a computer uses electrical signals and these electrical signals are in the form of binary codes. The bottom illustration shows a transistor circuit which, in basic terms, can either be on or off, like a 0 or a 1. Again, I won't go into too much detail on this as it's quite far removed from the theme of mud and soil. These images here show a bit more about the ECG, so the electrocardiogram pads that I have connected to the plants, and the additional circuitry used to generate the radio signal. So ECG pads are the same things that are used to monitor our heart rates in hospitals, and they're capable of identifying minute shifts in voltages. And that's something that calathea plants, and this is why I selected them, have, because they actually they run on like a circadian rhythm of their own. So they move throughout the day. So at night their leaves will raise up, and at the day they'll sort of drop back down to maximize sort of the energy they can gain from photosynthesis. So for the final part of the project, it's the air core antenna, which emits the radio waves, and then we have the receiver, which records it. This system works similar to how a telegraph machine would work, and as the signal is received, an electromagnet will pull the arm down, allowing the pen on the end to make contact with the paper that's moving beneath. But instead of translating these dots and dashes as a Morse code, which is what traditionally a telegraph machine would do, I'm instead recording them as a more simplistic binary code. The binary code is then organized into sets of 8 digits, and each 8 digits is checked against an ASCII table to gain an alphabetical value. So the first word I managed to produce using this system was Fio, and I initially thought it meant nothing, but on a little bit some further digging, I found out that it was North Italian slang word for "hey dude," or more literally, "hey son." The picture on the left shows the tower in use at a London wildlife spot, and the illustration on the right is a full schematic of how it works. If anyone wants to find out any more information about this or talk to me about how, like, a little bit more about the particulars, I'd happily address it at the end. As almost like an expansion on the sort of the premise of the microbial fuel cells, I've been researching and exploring alternative ways to create batteries from soil. And one method I've come across is to use the soil as an electrolyte between two metals. So here I have pictured one of the sort of initial attempts at this, and one of the initial setups. And just using 8 cells, I've been able to create enough power to light up an LED. The soil that I've collected for this has actually had sort of some dormant seeds and has actually even begun to sprout some green shoots. And so far, there's not been any adverse effect on the plants from this sort of very low current passing through. So the constituent parts that are needed for this are even simpler than those required for the microbial fuel cells. All you need is some slightly wet earth, some copper wire, and some zinc-coated nails. The way it kind of works is that the earth acts as an electrolyte between the two different types of metal electrodes. So it's not that dissimilar from how, like, what you would see with a lemon battery or a potato battery. And when the circuit is complete, the negative electrons move from the zinc to the copper, which is your current, and then the positively charged electrons move from the copper through the earth electrolyte and into the zinc. So this example houses 24 cells connected in series and pumps out about just over 1.5 volts, which is the same as a single AA battery. If you want to learn any more about how any of this works, or to ask me some questions about the microbial fuel cells, I'll be running a workshop in collaboration with Narratives of Soils, more information on which will be coming soon. Thank you all very much for listening.